Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Snelly-Miller. I'm one of the project managers for DelDOT Planning. I am the planner for Sussex County specifically, which is why I'm part of this study. Just a couple quick side notes. Senator Hopper and Rep. Gray send their apologies. They had a special session call tonight by the governor, so they were planning on attending, but then last minute they were not able to. But we do have Councilman Doug Hudson here, who has been a part and supportive of the study as well. So we're going to start North Bethany Bike and Pedestrian Safety Study. This is a public workshop, and we figure about an hour, but we're not going to leave you in an hour if we're still having conversations. So we're here for the long haul if we need to. My consultant team is from Whitman Record and Associates, Leah Kakanda and Kyle Clevenger. That's the first time I worked with Kyle, so they're a great team. They have all of my faith in their abilities to deliver a lot of good information tonight. We're going to start with the data, and then we'll go into some of the strategies that we've developed. So unfortunately, the first thing I have to talk about is safety on our roads. We have now 125 fatalities on Delaware roadways. That is statewide, not just Sussex County. But as you can see, it's also not just vehicle crashes, it's pedestrians, bikes, and motorcyclists. The highest we've had in many years. So this type of study is the kind that we're doing across the state to try and help improve safety for all of our travelers, whether you're in a vehicle, on a bike, or walking or running on the roadways. So tonight's agenda. So basically, we're going to give you an overview. We're going to talk about what the existing conditions were, which includes the corridor characteristics, observations, traffic volumes for peds, bikes, and vehicles, the travel times, the ped and bike crash analysis, and then road diet. I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with road diets, but it's basically shrinking the roadway down and making it more multimodal versus having it be kind of a high-speed highway. So again, once we're through the data, we're going to talk about some strategies that we think are going to work, which will be short-term stuff we can do right away, mid-term stuff that's going to take probably about 5 to 8 years, and then the longer-term stuff is stuff that we put into our capital transportation program, which is 8% federally funded. So that's like the big haul stuff. And then they're going to talk to you about some of the alternatives assessment, which is the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Alternative 2 is going to be a crossover closure with the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. And then alternative 3 is going to be a crossover modification and the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. Next slide. And so this started, it really started before Rep. Gray requested it. He did get involved to get this study off the ground for sure. But it actually started with Mr. Seth Hammond reaching out to myself and Linda Osecki, our pedestrian coordinator at DelDOT, during COVID when everyone kind of stayed home, but then decided they needed fresh air. And so there was more bikes and more peds and more everybody at the beach. So for the past 2 years.
Slow down a little bit.
Okay.
Folks online are having a hard time.
Oh,
hearing
sorry.
the audio, yeah.
So it's been about 2 years that we've been working with staff in assessing the area, trying to kind of figure out where the focus of this study needed to be. But then I was able to get this part of the study funded. And so this summer we had our consultant team go out and start the assessment, doing counts on the ground, which you'll be able to see the data for in just a few minutes.
Thank you, Jen. As Jen said, my name is Leah. I'm a planner with WRA. Kyle, he's the engineer and I'm the planner. So I'm kind of the big picture thinker and he's the data guy. We're excited to be here tonight and share what we learned. So we did get out in the field, and one of our goals for this is obviously the way people walking and biking travel the corridor is much different in the peak season than the off season. Although we do understand that at this point there are people walking and biking throughout the year. Increasingly, obviously, more of you are living down here full time and still want to get out and move. So we met out at the end of July, and fortunately we were able to kind of get out and attend get some people on the ground and making some counts. So at that kickoff meeting, we heard from Seth and representing the coalition and a number of your local elected officials. Thank you for joining us on some concerns. Obviously, speeding along the corridor, the fact that we don't have any marked pedestrian crossings out there right now. Also, pulling out of some of the neighborhoods. People maybe are looking left for cars, but aren't looking right for people walking and biking. Some overgrown vegetation issues, a little bit, not too much of that, and just general things that I'm sure you've all observed. So we collected feedback on where we should post up and count, and you'll hear more about that from Kyle momentarily. And we had some preliminary ideas to consider as we were out there making those observations, signing and striping upgrades, and some other techniques. So as you know, so as far as questions go, we are going to kind of get through the existing conditions and then pause for questions. And then we'll get into our strategies and recommend some of our preliminary recommendations, and we'll pause again. So we'll be ready for you in a minute. So the corridor we really ended up focusing on was Route 1, between the bridge you see right out the window, down to the the town limits of Bethany Beach, so around 5th Street, Atkinson Road. So it's about 4.5 mile stretch. As you know, 4 lanes, divided highways, and kind of a unique treatment on the shoulders with the bike markings and pedestrian markings. And as I'm sure most of you know, bikes by law are required to travel with traffic, and pedestrians by law are required to travel into traffic, and that's for safety reasons and for expectations of users. Now, I'm sure you all observe also, oftentimes people are not following those conventions because it's probably a little scarier to cross the street than it is to stay on the side, especially if your origins and destinations are on the same side. So that's one thing we're very aware of and is a concern. We also have a couple of bus stops out there right now, and right now if you get off the bus, you're kind of stuck on that side of the road and you have to cross. So obviously, when we look at crossing locations, we want to consider transit as well as all of our U-turn locations and private driveways. So because a lot of these communities are privately owned, DelDOT cannot make any improvements to those entrances. We know a lot of them do have, with their stop sign, a look both ways sign underneath it. So that's really great, but the state cannot come in and make any modifications there. That's on all of your homeowners associations. So we trust with the coalition and many of your support that we could collaborate if there are solutions there. So right now, the speed limit is posted 55 miles per hour north of Fred Hudson Road, and that decreases south of Fred Hudson, 45 miles per hour. The annual traffic volumes out there are a little north of 32,000 vehicles daily. I noticed some of you taking pictures, which is great, but we will make this whole slide deck available, and we're making a recording right now as well. So if you have friends or family who cannot be here, we can spread this out along with the survey. So don't worry, we'll get this in your hands. And I think everything else we touched on already with the no marked crosswalks and all of that. And I'm going to turn it over to Kyle.
Thanks, Leah. So yeah, after we met in the field with Seth, we actually took a ride in the car and just kind of looked at hot spots along the corridor, areas of concern. So we identified 7 sites. We sent the team out the next weekend on Saturday, July 30th. You guys might not remember that day, but it was like a high of 84, no humidity. It's like a perfect day. I know Seth had brought up some concerns that, there's potential that Saturdays aren't as busy because of turnover on rentals. But we did look at the trail volume. There's a traffic counter at the Fresh Pond Trailhead, and that showed really no difference between Saturday and Sunday volume. Sunday is slightly higher, but when we were out there, you'll see from the data, there's plenty of pedestrian and bicycle activity. We had to go out the following weekend too to grab the last site. So we looked at longitudinal pedestrian and bicycle volumes, people using the shoulders of Route 1. We counted people crossing Route 1. The Fresh Pond Trailhead, we did our own count of traffic in and out of that, and then just general observations while we're out there, anything to note, origin destinations, travel patterns, conflicts. I'm gonna get the slide there. So this is our longitudinal pedestrian bicyclist volumes. These are hourly volumes, the peak hour. at each site. And so you can see here the sites that we chose. So for example, the 106 bikes at Cotton Road and Cove Way, that's a total of both directions, both shoulders of Route 1. But you guys can see just from the numbers, like there's a serious number of bicyclists and pedestrians out here. Yeah, over 100 bikes an hour, 40 to 50 to 60 up at Cedell Drive, you have 82 pedestrians an hour. And one of the things we noticed was a lot of the pedestrians use the northbound shoulder, regardless of what direction they're walking, because it's shaded. I think it's, it's just generally people want to be on that side. And then we go to the crossing volumes, next slide. So these are pedestrians crossing Route 1. You can see it varies throughout the corridor, but at the Fresh Pond Trailhead, we had 51 people crossing in just a single hour. So the numbers are pretty staggering. Even throughout the rest of the corridor, you have 20, 21. So obviously there's people trying to get back and forth. I know some of these communities have deeded access from one side of Route 1 to the other. So it was apparent, and the trailhead is clearly the highest volume, and that's going to be the place where we start, which you'll see where we're going to start with our improvements. And then we went out and collected some spot counts just to get an idea of what the turning movement volumes look like at some of these crossovers. So this is during Saturday, August 27th, middle of the day. So you can see hourly volumes northbound on Route 1, you got 1,200 up to 1,500 vehicles an hour. Northbound, southbound is a little under 1,900. But you can see the side street traffic and the U-turns, they're pretty negligible volumes there. That just gives you an idea of hourly summer volumes. And here's hourly volumes along Route 1. I know this is hard to read. On the left side, that is SR1 at Collins Street and Dewey. So this is traffic, at the north end of the corridor. So the top is midweek. So on the left side is Collins Street, the right side is Fred Hudson. The top is midweek volumes, the bottom is weekend volumes. And these are from April. So this is like the shoulder season here. So you can see midweek, we have like 600, 700 cars an hour, 400 to 500 at Fred Hudson. The weekend that bumps up slightly. But when you go to the next slide in the summer, you can see this is the same scale, how much higher the volumes are. Not quite double, but midweek at Collins Street in the summer, you have 1,000 to 1,100 vehicles an hour. And that's about the same on the weekend in the summer. There's not a whole lot of variation weekday to weekend in the summer. And then you see the same trends at Fred Hudson Road. They're also around 800, 900 to 1,000 vehicles an hour in the peak direct, and that's directionally, so in each direction. And all this again is available online if you guys want to look.
Yeah, when you get the PDF, you'll be able to get into the weeds and read the numbers.
Yeah, zoom in a little more. We also looked at travel times along the corridor. So we used April data to look at like a typical AM and PM peak hour in the weekday. And then we looked at July, Saturday data. So from Dewey to the Inlet Bridge, you can see during the week in April, it's about 5.5 minute travel times, and then about 2 more minutes, tack that on for the summer. Similarly, down below the bridge to Bethany, you're looking at 4 minutes roughly in the off season, and then add another minute to that. So that's just, really just due to the increased volumes. Speed study, the DelDOT traffic actually collected a speed study out here recently. So we used portable tubes to collect speed data. And you can see based on the results here, locations A, B, and C are where it's posted 55 miles an hour. Your average speeds were generally in that range, a little slower at site C when you're coming out of that 45 mile an hour zone north of Fred Hudson. 85th percentile speeds are nearly 10 miles over the speed limit. And then site D, which is in that 45 mile an hour zone, or I'm sorry, that's actually south. That's in the 35 mile an hour zone in the town of Bethany. You can see it's a little better there, likely due to the enforcement that's pretty consistent there in Bethany. And then we look at pedestrian and bicycle crash history. So we only focused on ped and bike crashes, with that being the focus of the study. Over the 10-year period from August 2012 till this August, there were 12 total pedestrian and bicycle crashes, one of which was a fatality, unfortunately. So looking at those 12 crashes, 6 of those involved vehicles turning out of the neighborhood westbound from the beach side, turning right, and they'd hit a bicyclist or a pedestrian coming the wrong way. Well, the pedestrian is going the right way. That was only one incident, but 5 incidents of the bicyclist coming the wrong way. You're pulling out of your driveway and you're just looking left for traffic, and you don't see that bicyclist coming. So that was the biggest trend we saw. We had 3 crashes involving bicyclists on the shoulder that ran into a parked car. Seems kind of silly, but that's an actual concern, is people parking or broken down vehicles when they're sitting on that shoulder. There's nowhere to go if you're a bicyclist. And if you're in that predicament where, do I go in the travel lane or do I hit this car? You're probably just gonna hit the car, the parked car. Take your chances there. 2 crashes involved vehicles entering the travel lane. They're northbound. One of them was by the trailhead, and that was one of the fatalities. Not sure the circumstances behind those. And then there was 1 crash involving a vehicle entering the right turn lane as a bicyclist going the same direction was in there. I'm sure you guys have seen that conflict. That's actually pretty common in Dewey. We found a lot of those type of crashes. So, and looking at day, week, time of day, you can see Saturday's our biggest day. Surprisingly, there were none on Sunday, but pretty well distributed throughout the week. And then time of day, all crashes occurred during daylight hours. 12 to 3 was our biggest cluster there, but it's not really a nighttime issue since people aren't really using the facilities at night. On to the next slide there, Leah. And then we look at crashes by year and by month. So you can see 2022 has actually been pretty rough, and we're not even through the full calendar year yet, which really harps on what Jen was talking about with just the general increase statewide. And then by month, no surprise there, it's really focused on those summer months. So when we looked at the corridor as a whole, we wanted to do our due diligence and look at this road diet scenario. So essentially that's taking Route 1 and turning into 1 lane in each direction. And then you have 20 feet width to provide like a nice separated buffer and bikes, and it's a great idea for pedestrians and bicyclists. But as you'll see, if you go to the next slide, Leah, we looked at what would happen if we did do that. So the top is some of those 3 crossovers I showed you where we collected the turning movement volumes, and your eastbound coming out of your neighborhoods, you're looking at up to 1.5 minutes extra of delay. The U-turns aren't as affected, so it would obviously be an inconvenience for local residents trying to leave their homes. But the more telling data is below. We ran highway capacity analysis on 2-lane roadways with no passing zones, and you see your time spent following another car is basically 100% of the time. You're never in a free flow situation. Your average travel speed's down around 35, 40 miles an hour, and your level of service, which it's basically a scale, A being no delay and F being congestion, it would just be congested. So not to mention the public backlash that DelDOT will get from doing such a thing. So we did our due diligence, but we're not recommending going down to 1 lane.
So that is our data, and what we're going to do is pause right now for questions. Now, we do have 81 people online, which is awesome, but because of that, I will ask that maybe raise a hand. I'll call on you, you can state your name clearly, and as you'll note, Kyle and I have been speaking loudly because these little speakers hanging from the ceiling are the only way folks can hear us. So over here.
Hi, my name is Jan Simonson, and I live in Pond Acres, which is on Fred Hudson Road, off of Fred Hudson Road, east of the Salt Pond community. We had a meeting at our home with a number of representatives to consider a pedestrian walkway from the North Beach condos to the Salt Pond community. And my question is whether or not you guys are doing a study to determine whether that in fact can take place.
So our study area for this effort has focused on the corridor, as you saw just here. So we have not looked at that specifically, but we're gonna take notes tonight and take all that back. Now, once we're done this, we get into the suggestions part, so we're gonna be giving you more information in a minute. So that I took a note, and there's a comment form here and there's an online survey, so you can include that note. And we can document it for the record. Yes, sir.
I'm John Dickman, live in Cedar. Prior to 2012, I don't remember 20 years ago or how long ago it was, but there were a couple years there where we had deaths of bicyclists hit along in front of our subdivision one year and then up a ways another year. And they were hit and runs. And they were by distracted drivers and then not wanting, they were actually hit and runs. And I guess I thought, and you're basically saying there was no incident of that kind of thing in the last 10 years.
Correct, not for people walking and biking.
So as an avid biker, a member of the Sussex County Cyclist Club, I'm on that road as often as I can, as is my whole family. It's the near misses that count. I remember the 2015 when the lady was crossing to go into Fresh Pond State Park and was hit just south of Ocean Ridge West on her bike. I've seen a handful of other ones. I fully agree that, bikers have to go with traffic. That's the way it goes. And when that doesn't happen, it creates problems. There's some education involved here. But for the most part, if you look at the near misses, and there's not a biker I know that can't raise their hand and say they've had a couple near misses, Randy, you can attest to this. That's what we really have to think about. It's all anecdotal, but we know it's a dangerous spot. We've almost all been hit many times.
Yeah, if I could, so Anthony Aglio, who is our, I forget, they renamed their unit, and I apologize, I don't know the full name of it, but they are the ones who do all of the trails in the state, all of the bike connections. To the first question, we are working on that connection to the Fresh Pond Trail. So, yes, okay, good. Thank you, Anthony.
And we do have a couple of folks raising their hand virtually, so if anyone else has any pressing concerns. David Rupp, I'm going to allow you to talk. So hopefully if you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak to the room.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for conducting this workshop and being open to the input from the community. We really appreciate the chance, and hopefully, as you can tell, there's a lot of passion. I have a home, my family in Cotton Patch, and it struck me the data that the gentleman was just talking about, where there were 1,163 cars northbound per hour on average, which, if my math is close, that's about 19.4 per minute, or a car traveling northbound every 3 seconds. And as you pointed out, there's no crosswalk. The speed limit is 55, but the average speed of the cars traveling northbound was actually greater than 55 miles an hour for your data. So I'm just wondering, given that people need to travel from those North Bethany communities over to the park, the trailhead, given that in Cotton Patch, we actually have houses on both sides of the highway and people need to cross, often with strollers, children, beach chairs. There's just no way in 3 seconds that somebody can safely cross a 55-mile-an-hour highway. So it is a question. I don't mean for this to sound like a statement, but I'm just wondering if there are any real alternatives other than lowering the speed limit that would allow people to cross safely there. And thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, so we'll be getting into a conversation around lowering traveling speeds and some of the different strategies we could use for that next. But let's go on. John Basso, I'm going to allow you to talk, and apologies if I did not pronounce your last name properly.
Thank you. Yeah, so the first community you hit when you come off the bridge going south is Villas at Beach Cove and Indian River Villas. And so that's really probably the maximum speed that people are using before they even notice that they're hitting any communities. And there's no sign before that to even consider. So there isn't even a warning about the possibility of, a pedestrian crossing. And so I think that they're coming off the bridge, they're coming downhill. It seems to be a very I think that they're at their peak speed right around that point. And, you know, we've had a very hard time passing. I mean, I'm crossing by myself, but I see people with lots of baggage and children, and, you know, it's like, you know, run for your life kind of thing. And so I think that if it doesn't start there, you know, at the first pedestrian crossing, then, you know, all the subsequent crossings really aren't going to be affected. And I think it really sort of mirrors the idea of, just like, you know, you can't go faster than the car in front of you. Well, you know, if you start the process earlier, then it kind of gets people used to a slower speed limit. But once they know they can pick up speed, it's sort of, you know, that's the problem. I think that's what you have to keep in mind, is that it's sort of like acceleration kind of thing.
Thank you, John. So we have a couple other folks with their hands up. And Jen just commented, yeah, that is also where that bus stop is right as you come off the bridge on the right-hand side there. So moving on, Lynn Plack. I just allowed you to speak. If you come off mute.
Yep, there we go. Yes, Lynn Plack. I've been a resident in Bethany Village for 25 years. And we have 4 children now, 5 grandchildren. And I just think we love to walk, ride bikes, run, we do it all. And it's unrealistic on that North Bethany to cross the street. We're only 1.25 miles from town. And so to cross the street, to be going the right direction, and then no place to cross back into town is unrealistic. And I'd say it's pretty unrealistic for all that whole 3-4 mile stretch. So, and now what we do sadly is drive and try to find a place to park and walk around town, because we've had tomatoes thrown at us. You know, we've seen accidents, we've seen crazy driving. It just isn't safe. And on a flip note, here in Baltimore, I'm a realtor, and I just know that bike safety and, you know, people love riding bikes and walkability. It's such a big thing for the active retirement group. And I think it's so I'm so happy we're addressing this. It's been a long time necessary.
Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate your comments. I would like to acknowledge, especially for those of you on the call, that Representative Gray has joined us. So thank you, Representative Gray, for coming down from Dover. I see your jacket, so you must have been up there today.
Well, I didn't have to go do this one here, so I did put on a jacket. The dress is part of it. I can take it off.
And I would just say thank you to Ron Gray and Doug Hudson for all their support, and then for the great work you guys are doing. I mean, I think every resident of North Bethany or any stakeholder of this community, you know, we've never been so optimistic that things are moving in the right direction to improve the quality of life around here and reduce the risks that we see. So thank you.
But thank you for the recognition. And I was going to do Zoom, and last time I said I'm going to go up and listen to what people were saying right there. So that's why I raced up here. I was a little bit late, so my apologies.
Thank you for being here. So we do have hands continuing to go up in the chat, but with consensus of the group, I think maybe if we move forward to some of the strategies and recommendations we're considering, maybe that would address some of the questions. So if it's okay with those of you on the line with your hands up, we will come to you at the end of the presentation after we get through some of our recommendations and strategies. They're not recommendations yet, let me say that. They are strategies right now, because we are here today to hear from you as to what we do want to advance and call a firm recommendation coming out of this effort. So here we go. So firstly, with our strategies, when DelDOT does these studies, what we don't want is this document to go sit on a shelf somewhere and get dust on it, which I think we've all been familiar with something that when that happens, that's not what we want. So pretty much everything coming out of this has to fit into one of 3 categories. And those essentially are short, medium, and long range improvements. So short range improvements are usually within 1 to 3 years, sometimes right away, depending on how basic they are. And generally, those are improvements that can be handled by DelDOT's traffic group as part of paving or striping, and also the bridge group, and they go into the DelDOT CTP or Capital Transportation Program, but on the operations side of things. Now, the CTP is also capital improvements, so those are bigger changes. And those bigger changes, as you all know, take more time and they take more money, and they have to go into the process.
And actually, the 4 to 6 year horizon is probably when a project would start their design phase. So
Right.
that's not even barrels on the ground. We're talking just starting off with drawing and drafting kind of what the concepts are gonna look like.
Yes, and then long range, and that's where Jen, as a planner for Sussex County, is also in charge of keeping track of all the big picture, long-term recommendations of getting things done and making sure that stays on board. So just wanted to kind of have that caveat, and we're gonna walk through which of our kind of strategies fit into each of those categories. So, you know, this is not gonna be an overnight solution, but we do have some ideas. So some short range strategies that we could do very quickly. We could kind of standardize and improve signage at the exits to private residential developments potentially. Again, most of those are not in DelDOT's control. You see an example there on the screen of a look again for peds and bikes crossing. So that's something we could coordinate potentially.
So I don't want everybody to be like, oh, they're already giving us something to do as an HOA. Please understand, because you all have private developments with private roads, it is gonna be collaborative. So we're gonna take care of the things we can take care of on Route 1. You'll have to take care of some of the things along your roadsides, and working with our legislators and our councilmen to maybe get some assistance with that. And we're here as a resource always. So please don't feel like we're pushing everything off to anybody. It's gonna continue to be a collaborative experience.
Thank you, Jen. And the other really quick and easy thing is evaluating site distance. So if you're coming out of a development and you have to pull forward into the shoulder to see both ways, that's a problem, right? So if you have to pull into the shoulder to tell if a bike's coming, we're already at a conflict point. So we look to all of you if there are any places where there's overgrown trees or vegetation, and depending again where that's located, if it's within DelDOT's right of way, the DelDOT crews can handle it. If it's on private property, it might be working with your HOA to make sure that's trimmed back. So those are some things immediately we
One
can
of the
start
most
tackling.
overgrown areas of Route 1 that we saw was actually at the Fresh Pond Trailhead, and it wasn't out encroaching onto the road, but we definitely called Denmark and said, go cut your stuff back, because that's necessary, right? So as everyone's coming out of that trailhead, they would need to be able to see, so something like that we can take care of.
So the other thing we are looking at pursuing right away is beginning the design process for rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So I'm going to show you a picture of those in a moment, but most of you should be familiar. That's what's been installed up in Dewey and down in Bethany when you push the button and you get the strobe lights and a marked crosswalk. So we're going to get into more detail with that. But one thing we can kind of hit the ground running with is the design of those. So we're ready once funds are available for implementing them. And another thing we do want to do is, of all the crossings, the one that had the most volumes by far, again, that was almost 50 an hour, was right at that Fresh Pond Trailhead. So we want to kind of jump on that right away and implement an improvement there as quickly as possible.
When this study first started, we did a kickoff meeting at the Fresh Pond Trailhead with Representative Gray, Senator Hucker, Councilman Hudson, and the amount of people, just as we were standing there crossing Route 1, I think really drove that home, that is definitely the most utilized crossover on Route 1 right now, and the most concerning crossover on Route 1 right now. So.
Yeah, and the other thing we can do is short-term siding and striping improvements. So on the way down, I'm sure many of you have noticed, the lane edge line on this side of the bridge is nice and wide and bright white. And once you cross over the bridge, that line is much more narrow and faded. So we have found throughout the state that a wider, brighter separator, obviously it's not doing anything to protect anyone, and we're not going to pretend it is, but it gives more of a visual barrier, and hopefully is a little bit, is something we can do pretty quickly. And easily, it's just wider striping, and increasingly when DelDOT comes through and does repavings, we put wider lines back in place, because broadly we've seen that helps with some outcomes. So
yeah, Lee, if I could jump into
Please.
with the RFB designs, we're going to be looking at those designs along the entire corridor. I know one of the gentlemen that spoke, he was concerned, with when you're coming down off the bridge, you want that first one to be the first one you see. You could say the same thing coming northbound out of Bethany. So what we're gonna do with the design is we wanna design the whole corridor, look at it holistically and really come up with like a plan with these RFBs. It's gonna work in cohesion. And look at potential crossover modifications with that. So that may be, just adding islands or shifting where the crossovers are, maybe closing some. So there will be a level of give and take, you guys have to work with us on some. You might be inconvenienced, have to drive another half mile to the next crossover. But those are all things that we still need to flesh out and evaluate. And then with those RFBs, we're also looking, you can see if we're looking at roadway lighting improvements. So we know there's not a big nighttime component out there right now, but it's kind of like if you build it, they will come. So we want to make sure if we're putting RFBs out there, we're providing some level of lighting if people do choose to use it at night. Sorry.
No, thank you, Kyle. That's very helpful. And again, we'll be getting in at the in another few slides of what these crossings would actually look like. So bear with us for some more greater level of detail there. Slide, come on. Change. There we go. So here's an example of a RFB. This one's
That's Wellington Parkway and Bethany Beach.
yeah. So again, so here's an example of, right now people often are crossing where there's an existing place you can do a U-turn. This is through a median. So there's a bunch of different configurations that we'll show momentarily, but just in case anyone had any question about what these silly RRFB things are, for some reason, us transportation professionals love our acronyms. So thank you.
And if you notice, what I like to point out too is the refuge area that exists now for pedestrians and bikes. Because sometimes when you're sitting inside a crossover that's paved for vehicles, that's very kind of stress inducing, right? So this calms it down a little bit, makes you just stop and pause and then make sure that it's safe to cross once the beacons start going off.
Thank you, Jen. So medium range, we have already talked to the DelDOT paving group. And right now, this segment of road is not on their schedule. So they usually do a schedule like 2 to 3 years out, but there is interest in maybe moving that forward. We'll see. But one thing that could be done, and I'll show you what that could look like, is narrowing the lanes down. So right now, the actual travel lanes that cars are moving on is 12 feet wide. That's increasingly throughout the state, we're narrowing to 11 feet wide. Again, incorporating that wider striping, and we also could do a striped buffer, so that in addition to the wider stripes, we could actually stripe a buffer area between the edge of the vehicle lane and the shoulder. So show what that would look like, and also in conjunction with that pavement rehab, we could begin to implement some more of those crossing improvements Kyle was just discussing, as well as implementing those lighting improvements. So just to share, this is what's out there right now. We have a pretty wide grass median. It's 34 feet for those of you who can't quite see that screen, with 12-foot wide lanes and a 10-foot shoulder. And even if we just taper all those lanes down to 11 feet, we gain enough space to stripe a nice wide 3-foot barrier between the edge of the drive lane and where people are walking and biking without losing any width for the people walking and biking. So you still have 10 full feet. So this is kind of an interim configuration we could look at that would give you a little more space. Again, no physical barrier between where you're walking and biking and the cars, but a little bit more space. And those narrower lanes could also slow cars down a little bit in conjunction with the crossing improvements. When we look at measures that start causing people to slow down, it's things at the edge of the roadway. If there's more vegetation in the median too, that's another strategy we talked about. Up here on the north side of the bridge coming down, it's kind of like a wildflower meadow in the median. And then once you get south of the bridge, it's just close cut grass. So that can also prevent people from slowing down a little bit, to have some more interest going on there. So that's a potential interim improvement. And then looking at long range, and we have another section you can look at momentarily here. Just want to note, any of these improvements have to be coordinated with Sussex County. So in other parts of the state, they have planning organizations that kind of help this process, but in Sussex, we have Jen. So, but the county does have to be on board in order to recommend a project to go into that capital transportation program. So they are abreast of this. They've been kept up to date on what we're up to, and we'll be seeing this presentation. Any bigger improvements are of course gonna have to look at stormwater management. We know there's flooding issues down here. DelDOT has a new resiliency section. We're gonna wanna make sure we're working hand in hand with them. Another thing we've talked about, if you've traveled Route 1 further north, heading upstate, you've noticed those cable median barriers that are going in. And that is because unfortunately, that safety data Jen presented early on, we're seeing a lot of cars crossing over grassy medians and having head-on collisions. Unfortunately, that is happening. That is something we are very concerned about statewide. Do those median barriers look very pretty? No, they do not. But were we to do a median barrier and some wild kind of native plantings to mask it, that could potentially both be a safety measure with an aesthetic improvement. So we're excited to hear from you on that. And the most exciting, in my humble opinion, is potentially reconfiguring that roadway to accommodate a truly separate shared use path along the east side of Route 1 between Bethany and Indian River Inlet Bridge. And fortunately, the right of way is so wide. So if you look again at the screen, there's our existing conditions again. And if we make our grassy median a little bit more narrow and shift our lanes over, we would have plenty of room for a nice wide 14-foot, which is generally we go with 10 feet for a shared use path, but increasingly in coastal communities, as many of you I'm sure know, these facilities are very popular and 10 feet is not wide enough when it's crowded. So looking at a nice wide 14-foot pathway for people walking and biking, that would still retain shoulders for those of you who are avid cyclists and like going a little faster. You'd still have your shoulders to ride. But if you're out with your family or some people who just want to take a leisurely ride, you could have that option. Now that's just an example. And again, any of these improvements would have to coordinate with stormwater management because we're increasing the pervious surface, so drainage might be more of an issue, and this is a long-term goal. These things are not cheap. They require a lot of planning and a lot of design. But given the volumes of people walking and biking out here, we definitely think it would be well used.
So again, this is something that will be talked about with the county and then eventually submitted for a C2P project. The study for that type of configuration would be much larger than what we've done so far.
So I have some more details on the crossings and then we can open it up for questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to.
Oh, and any of the longer range projects are also going to be out for public workshops multiple times before anything is ever done. So I don't want anybody to think like this is the first time you're going to see it and then boom, it's going to be coming into any plan. That's not how it works. We are required, and I love doing public workshops. So trust me, you will see me many, many times before any of the major projects come online.
So I'm going to turn it back over to Kyle, who's going to share some detail on what those crossings could look like, and then we'll break for questions and comments. So.
Yep. So we looked at again the fresh pond trailhead since that was the highest concentration of pedestrian crossings. But this is a typical application that we could apply throughout the corridor. And I'm going to share like a few alternatives just so you guys can kind of see like our thought process and what we've been thinking about. So alternative one here is just maintaining existing conditions and putting in RRFBs, and you can see the yellow is new concrete there, so you'd have a new refuge area in the median. So the benefit is obviously with the RFB, you press the button, like we said, it flashes, it's conspicuous. People know there's pedestrians in the area. We also have a few new sites where we've actually just installed advanced flashers. So you press that button, it's going to flash, but then also a quarter mile up the road, there could be a flashing RFB saying pedestrians ahead. We've also installed an overhead mast arm. I imagine maybe we go that route on Route 1 given the volumes, but you can mount the sign and the flashers overhead and ground mount. So we do have some different techniques we can use. So this is alternative one, essentially keeping everything existing and then just putting the crosswalk and the flashers in. You can see the pedestrian crossing distances, that's just what's out there today. Crossing southbound, since you have that extra turn lane there, it's about 48 feet and then 38 feet on the northbound side. Alternative two, we would be looking at just closing the crossover completely and then putting the RFB in. So this is beneficial for pedestrians, just it's less confusing with the additional turning movements and U-turns of the cars when we were out there at the trailhead, you could see when the pedestrians were kind of in the median, in the crossover area, and then you'd have cars coming the turn lane. It's just more conflict and more things to deal with. So this makes it like a true mid-block crossing where you're, as a pedestrian, you're only dealing with the 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. You don't have to worry about turns. The downfall of that is obviously you have to detour traffic. So if you typically U-turn there, you're gonna have to go up to, I believe it's, is it Cove? I can't remember. We'll show you on the next slide. But you have to U-turn at the next one to the north, southbound, you have to go further south to U-turn. But you can see the crossing distances, you're getting 10 feet shorter on that southbound side by removing that left turn lane. And then we look at alternative 2, this is just some data behind it showing you where the vehicles would have to U-turn and then what those impacts would be. So the U-turns you can see, no change, like the plus 0.2 seconds, that's 0.2 seconds of delay. So you're not gonna affect operations of the U-turns. And then coming out of your developments, it's 3 to 10 seconds extra of delay. And that's because if you're coming out of your development at Cotton Patch Hills, you're just gonna have a few more U-turns to contend with, but it's not gonna be the minute plus delay we saw.
So if I could just interject real quick, so Cave Neck Road, for those of you that are familiar with some of the corridors further north, because of the 5-point study, I've been a part of some of the discussions. We ended up closing the crossover that was directly out of Cave Neck Road. And in doing so, we forced all of the traffic coming off that road onto Route 1 to drive down and make a U-turn. And honestly, what we saw was so much improvement in conflict points. Crashes were next to nothing after we did that. So while this looks a little unusual and maybe like it'll take more time for you all, it is actually a safer movement. What we saw at the Fresh Pond Trailhead, cars were not even utilizing the crossover correctly, let alone yielding to pedestrians and bikes within the crosswalk.
And we actually had a question about what is the proper way to make a U-turn, because I think people are not aware. So Kyle, do you want to describe that for folks?
Yeah, that's actually another one of the short-term sign and striping improvements, is adding some striping to the crossovers. So when you're approaching one of those, you're supposed to go all the way to the far end, because when you're making the U-turn, you want to be able to see that oncoming traffic without, if you were to turn at the near side, the opposing, if there's an opposing left turn or U-turner, they'll be blocking your view. So I know it's hard for those not online, but you want to go to the far end and turn. So yeah, the crossover striping, that's another short-term improvement we can implement. And then the third option, this is kind of the best of both worlds as far as maintaining existing vehicular mobility and then providing the crossing for pedestrians. So the green that you see, that would be extending the grassy median, and the blue would be new pavement. So what we're doing is shifting the crosswalk south, and the U-turns can move concurrently with PEDs. You basically eliminate that conflict. And then you're also getting a shorter crossing distance. This option's obviously more costly with removing pavement and adding pavement, building that big channelizing island. And when you get into these median modifications, you're gonna have drainage impacts. There may be some utilities to adjust, but this is a nice balance here. So again, this is just at the Fresh Pond Trailhead. These are the types of analyses we're gonna be doing at every one of those spots that we counted, and we're gonna try to come up with a master plan essentially for the corridor. And the goal is, with all these RFBs, it's gonna feel more like that Middlesex Bethany area, and it's gonna naturally promote slower speeds. And with the striping improvements too, if we're able to get a pave and rehab, get the buffers in, narrow the lanes, we're hoping that all of this will naturally lead to slower speeds. I know we haven't mentioned lowering the speed limit, and that's just not something that DelDOT's really willing to do at this time, mainly because of the extreme public opposition to lowering the speed limit.
Well, okay, I'm assuming that we'll be able to speak to that matter. I mean, I was wondering why that wasn't part of a short-term plan strategy, but you're saying that that's off the table? Lowering the speed limit is off the table?
At this time.
At this time, it's basically come up in the past and it was shot down.
Well, that's past is past.
Yeah. Understood.
I've got one point to make as far as these flashing rectangular signs
Yes.
and the speed. First of all, a lot of times, and I've seen this in my little town, people feel they automatically have the right of way and they go without looking. And people coming 55 miles an hour and they don't notice those signs, there's not a red light, you're gonna have some problems.
I see that, I mean, I've never, is there any instance in the state of Delaware where you have RRFBs and a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit that's lightly enforced, unfortunately, because you were in an unincorporated area that does not have its own police force? There's no example.
No, and actually that's.
So this is ludicrous.
This would be the first in the, with a speed of this nature, and if we were to implement RFBs, that could be, like, let's say we're gonna install 8 RFBs, that could be the justification for lowering the speed limit.
Right.
If we can't come out, we just can't come out right now and lower the speed.
So the argument is to make it look more like a residential area, to calm the traffic, the flow of traffic, and then we lower the speed limit.
Exactly.
But it just seems like we could do these things simultaneously. You guys are the experts and we have a lot of respect for all the work you guys do. So we're trusting that this process
And we
flows
have,
that way.
we have to defer to our traffic team.
Yeah.
And again, what they're telling us is that these are the first steps that we need to take, right? And as you said, we need to make this area look more residential and not like the high-speed area that it currently looks like right now. Because again, when you come over that bridge, as soon as you come out of Dewey Beach, people think they can just push the pedal to the metal and keep going. So again, it's just changing the look and feel of this area. That's
If
the
I
most
could
important
speak
part.
up, I'm just again, and I echo everything you said about speed limits, but the closest example of the RF, whatever they're called, is the signs that I am aware of close by is across Fred Hudson. Is the speed limit's slower there. And I think stopping for one of those from 55 miles an hour is really ludicrous. But beyond that, there's a much lower volume of crossers there. I mean, here you've got one person a minute, and even on Fred Hudson, if you've seen it, when there is people crossing, it produces huge backups on Fred Hudson. If you got people who are stopping one every minute on average on Route 1, that's gonna produce huge bottlenecks on Route 1 because it's got 5 times the quantity of people trying to cross and people going a lot faster. I think you're gonna have more accidents, more congestion, and a more unhappy populace than you have by just lowering the speed limit.
And I'll be honest with you, the reason we formed this coalition 3 years ago, we were kind of sick of hearing about the extreme public opposition to a lower speed limit. I mean, the science and data are saying that this is a residential area, there's plenty of pedestrians that are at risk. The speed limit shouldn't be at 55 miles an hour. This is not a political issue. This is a matter of life and death. So, and I don't think there's extreme political opposition, public opposition. I mean, who is against pedestrian safety?
That's a good question.
But my first reaction when I saw this was, it would be as, given the speed limit, it would be as if you're trying to put a crosswalk across I-95 or the Beltway.
Yeah.
Because that's the speed limit on the Beltway. And so I'm trying to imagine cars going fast, seeing that and having rear end accidents and other types of things.
And to your point on the one on Fred Hudson, I cross there every day and people don't stop. You hit that button, it's a yellow blinking light. People do not stop. I mean, they just,
I mean, most people do, but other people don't. You're gonna have, I mean, with 2 lanes, you're gonna have people getting hit.
One of the unfortunate things is in order to install a real traffic signal, you have to meet traffic signal warrants that are outlined in the MUTCD. It's the manual for uniform traffic control devices. And none of these crossovers will meet warrants for a signal.
Do you think this proposal you're making in the short term is going to help congestion, and do you think it's gonna reduce accidents, or do you think it's gonna increase?
It will increase accidents. I'm Leslie Kopp and I've lived in North Bethany for 18 years. And I can tell you right now, coming out of my neighborhood, Ocean Village, there is a access into the state park right there.
Yep.
It is horrible. I mean, I cannot believe that we do not have more accidents. They're coming. And the town of Bethany, the town of South Bethany, I'm on the roads every day, and the amount of accidents that I see coming because people are driving and one person will start to stop for someone. And this person coming this way doesn't see that person there in front of that car. And that's at 25, 35 miles an hour.
I need to tell you that I just met with the town of Bethany. I just
It's
had
a
the
problem.
police chief tell me they have no crashes. None.
They will, trust me.
But
I'm on
they
the road
don't,
every-
but they
yeah,
have
but
not
it's
had a
coming.
crash history since they have gotten
Well, the
those-
speed limit is also very low.
That's correct, they're also a municipality who controls their speed limit, that is where the struggle comes. So let us do these, we need to have a action plan in place. This is part of the action plan, you are going to have to trust us, because otherwise, if it's no to everything we're proposing, then I don't know what else to tell you, other than you're gonna have to become an incorporated
In the
area.
summertime, people are on vacation, they're driving, they're not paying attention, and they're doing 55.
So again, it's gonna come out to,
I mean,
also, we are gonna do massive education efforts with this, we have to. Because in Lewis, they stop, in Bethany, they stop. So we are going to have to partner it with us being out in reflective vests, us making sure that we are getting out to people and letting them know that this is how we can do things in Delaware. And if it doesn't work, I don't know what to tell you, it's not working now. Someone is going to end up dead now.
I don't think anybody is disagreeing with the things you're suggesting. I think most of the things you're suggesting are,
They're
make a
wonderful.
lot of sense.
Absolutely.
And I think we'd all, we haven't voted, we'd all vote for it. We also still think the speed's a problem, and we're not clear why that can't be done tomorrow, frankly, and I guess you say there's a reason.
I mean, I defer to Ron and Doug, I mean, you guys are legislators, I mean, it seems like this stuff could be done hand in hand. It seems like this is a residential area, it seems like the data's saying the speed limit of 55 is ridiculous, so let's get it changed.
So I think this is very nice and it does, work for the place that gets used most often. But there are about 30 entrances and exits of streets on and off this Route 1 and the pedestrians crossing across them. And just trying to get into your neighborhood, you have to slam on your brakes, make sure your lane's open, because you have to get into that so the person behind you at 55 doesn't hit you while you're turning.
Right.
I mean, you just can't do this at 55.
Quick question, so who is objecting?
Where is this massive public?
Yeah, where's the
That's
public
right.
outcry?
Don't speak.
I've been a legislator for 10 years and this question's come up, we've got to do something about lowering the speed limit. So we've given it to the traffic guys. They've looked at it and they've always come back and said, we don't see enough data to support the lowering the speed limit out here.
So is that a different, I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting, that sounds like a different issue, though, that's saying there's not enough data, meaning enough fatalities or something, that's different from there's massive public opposition. Has there been some study or some representation of this public opposition? What evidence is there of this massive public opposition?
I don't know of any evidence personally, this is just what I was told, and I wasn't involved in any of the past, discussions on this.
I believe it was when
Yeah, we every 2 years since I've been in, we've asked to look about lowering the speed limit. And DelDOT has come back and said it's not appropriate in this condition. So we've continued to work with you and now we're like, well.
Now we have the data.
Well, so you had the idea about doing some sort of a barrier and then having walkers really on one side, I don't know how we get across, but it's like, it's a big area. And I've been working with Jeff Muscota, who does the trails, and I'm all over the district. I'm doing stuff, Double Bridges Road, we can't, to really upgrade the highways, you get in these longer term, it's 8, 10, 12 years to get in the cost to do these things. So we're looking for interim things we can get in 1 to 5 years. So having multi-use paths alongside of roadways, a lot of these roads don't have any shoulders at all, but this one, so we've been pushing to.
Absolutely, we appreciate it, Ron.
So what do we come up with? Like, so now we said, what can we do? And this in particular, I said, well, can we do a study? Another study. And then I'm delighted to hear that we've got something that is going to help this situation. And it's still scary at these higher speeds, but this is the first look at it. And we haven't implemented anything. We haven't given this back to traffic with these on them. So I think, I'm an engineer, but it seems logical to me, we need to lower speeds as well, but I'm not the traffic engineer people. But as a legislator, I'm going to try to support.
Thank you.
Public safety, is number one.
Thank you.
And public safety, the issues throughout the state have really gone up. I don't know, since 2020, I don't know what people have done. They don't have their heads on the cars anymore. They're flying and not watching, but these numbers are going up drastically. I mean, it's the number one thing that the Secretary of Transportation is saying, we've got to do something. I've been, we've had putting out signs just to tell people how fast they're going. Sometimes I don't think people really realize. And working with Jeff Muscody, saying you've got an area here that's so wide open. When we want to slow people down, you got to cramp up. Look at what Sea Colony did 10 or 15 years ago. That cut through they did from Route 1. Is anybody familiar with that?
Yes.
When I first saw that, I thought that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But I tell you what, you can't drive very fast through there, and you're not gonna. I bet they they don't have any real access there. So this is the first step here.
Changing behaviors.
Yeah, but I don't like what I'm seeing. I think your points are very well taken.
Oh, yeah.
And let's get traffic engineering. We gotta get the experts to support us as well.
Yeah.
So if I could interject, we are at 6 o'clock, so if folks need to leave, I want to let you know, there is an online survey. The link is up there. There's also a comment sheet. So just because you're in the room, obviously we are noting all of this, we're recording this. But even if you're not here right now, your opinion is just as valid. So if you have other folks who may want to chime in on this issue, we had 80 some folks on earlier, now we're down to 70. But having it noted, the sentiment around lowering the speed for the public record will go to all DelDOT, Traffic Division, Planning Division, and elsewhere. So, historically, talk of that has inspired some outcry. But obviously, there's a lot of you in the room right now, and that's why we're here to get,
And
feedback
DelDOT does,
from
we
you all.
work hand in hand with every section. Pete Haig, our traffic engineer, is phenomenal, and he has already committed to doing, as Kyle said, 6 to 8 installments across Route 1 in this segment. So that's huge. I mean, like, I need you to understand, he's working with us to try and help get things changed and better for this area. So I don't want you to think that it's off the table completely. It's nothing in the traffic world. I don't think anything's ever completely off the table unless it's something that's unsafe. So please bear with us. This is first steps. It was literally like we had the ability to do the study now, get it done now, so that and Rep Ray's support, we're able to get some of these things started. Right, so this is just the beginning. Like I said, everything that's gonna happen is most of the larger projects or different things, if we change things up, we're gonna come back to you and say, okay, here's what we're gonna do now. And you're gonna keep seeing us, here's what we're gonna do now. And it might not be me, it might be Anthony Aguilar, or it could be Pete Haig from traffic, it could be any of us from DelDOT. Again, we are Team DelDOT, we always have been, and we're gonna make sure we try and keep everybody safe. That's what I'm worried about, that's what Rep Ray's worried about, that's what Councilman Hudson's worried about. So just, I understand, believe me, I am born and raised, grew up in the original pot nets in the 70s and 80s. So seeing this area be dangerous is hard for me to look at as well. So please understand, I do care, and we're here to help.
I'd like to make one of the.
We know you do, thank you. Thank you very much.
I live in Cedar, so we're about what, quarter mile, half a mile north of
1 mile.
1 mile north of Hudson. And when that light changes at Hudson, it's a drag strip. And I'm not sure, motorcycles particularly, but I'm not sure what speeds they get to. But if there's any crosswalk in that area north of Hudson, it's gonna be a death trap. So that's what I think we need to really evaluate. It's gotta be the speed limit and the crosswalks. It can't be just the crosswalks. I think it's gonna be, you're gonna see those numbers go up on the accident.
And to the people that are against the speed limit change, if you simply explain to them, if you drive at 55 versus 45, for that stretch, it's less than a minute differential. I mean, I'm not a traffic my goddaughter's a traffic engineer, so I'm biased. I'm very biased toward the wonder of traffic engineers but I mean, just basic math, it's a minute to get to at 45 and it's 2 minutes at 35. So, I mean, what's a life worth? A minute or 2 minutes? I don't know who this public opposition is, because everyone I talk to thinks this is crazy and they can't believe it's happening. People that I've spoken with at Delaware State Police, at all the different agencies, and all the legislators seem to get it. So I think it's gonna be moving in the right direction. I think we have to have faith, like you said, in the process. So let's get the process started. So thank you.
And the coordination, right? Have faith in the process and the coordination, because it's not just DelDOT internal coordination, it's also coordinating with our legislators, our councilmen, Delaware State Police who were on the call, I'm not sure if they're still there or not, but everybody, Denver with the fresh, that's their trailhead, that's their part. So again, it's going to take a large effort to keep this momentum going. This is just the beginning.
Thank
That's
you.
what I'm here for.
Yes, hi, my name is Mickey Hinman, I'm actually in Bethany, I'm on the council there. One question you referred to, it was a really good question about the R. Well, you know, in a 55 mile, you said we don't have any of those in Delaware, are there any ones anywhere that?
I'd have to
I mean,
look into
literally
that.
in the country?
Yeah, I'd have to look into that.
Because it's a.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, it's, you know, at first it seems, you know, scary. And again, the goal is get all these implemented and make the whole corridor slower, and I think, I don't make the decisions, but I echo Jen's sentiment to have faith that if we get all these in, if we're doing these improvements, the lower speed limit will come with it because of, you know, these safety concerns. You know, one of the reasons from a traffic engineering standpoint that it's been hesitant to lower the speed limit is because I know you guys don't want to hear it, but the 85th percentile speeds, the way people are driving now is already at or above the speed limit. So you can arbitrarily put a 45-mile-an-hour sign up, but it's not going to change anybody's speed because of the look and feel of the corridor. It's wide open. It's just 12-foot lanes. You can put 45-mile-an-hour signs up, but more likely people aren't going to obey unless there's very targeted enforcement.
And that's where the enforcement and the education and everything else is
Yes.
gonna come with it.
We
So,
talked about speed cameras out there.
Yep.
Great idea, but it's not legal in Delaware. There's only
Yeah.
special legislation made for the viaduct project in Wilmington, but that's something hopefully that will continue to move forward and that could be.
And there is no enforcement in North Bethany on that one.
Right.
I mean, in all my
Never.
years.
So
Never.
what I found interesting is, and I'm not sure if everyone's aware, I was not aware, that your troop is actually out of Georgetown.
That's correct. I was gonna
There
bring
is
that up.
no enforcement.
Right. I'm a retired trooper and the troop areas change quite often. And this area now, all of east of 113 used to be Troop 7 in Lewis. Now it has changed drastically, and Troop 4 in Georgetown goes all the way up to the inlet now, or to the inlet now. And they're always fighting with minimum staffing. But I think that voices do make a difference when it comes to getting enforcement out. And I know I'm using my voice right now with, with troopers that I know and the troop commanders that I know in getting more enforcement out here. But I do think that I agree with Representative Gray that changing behavior with these RRFBs is a start. Because people will see the lights blinking and it kind of gets your attention. Right now, it's just wide open. And I think it's a start. And I'm not against changing the speed limit at all. I'm not against that. But, the county has no say over the roads, but I work very closely with DelDOT. And we have a great relationship, great working relationship, and as well with the local representatives, Representative Gray and Senator Hawk. And I'm staying engaged in this thing. And I think this is a great start. It's not going to be a fix immediately, but I think this is a great start because it possibly is going to change behavior a little bit when they see these lights flash. It's just my experience as a trooper.
Yeah, I just want to come back to one thing, because I think what was really helpful is you all talked about this idea of being an integrated approach, which is really the right way to go at this, right? And so it just strikes you that you're trying to set, I think proposing we do the the flashing light thing. And then the speed limit, rather than thinking about it as an integrated, and recognizing in Bethany, we got a different situation.
Yes.
But I ride up here, so I know exactly what we're talking about, right? And it would really be interesting. Again, I'd like to know if there's anywhere in the US that we've actually been able to implement something like that, which isn't integrated, which is not an integrated. We've got 55 mile an hour with, it's just like on 13, right? I mean, somebody talked about the Beltway. Can you imagine having one of these on 13? Yeah, the old 13, right? I mean, and I know it is about behavior, right? It's all, but 55, the difference, it's behavior when you're talking about 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, right, through these municipalities. Going from 55 when people are really doing 65, which is what the data says.
Just getting started at 65.
And then having one of these flashing lights that it just is mind-boggling.
Although, there was a speed sign placed at the base of the bridge that had the red, white, and blue flasher on it, which I've been told it's not allowed, but I saw quite a few people push their brakes. Yeah, they were slowing down.
That's even that, that's just saying, slowing people down to 55. I think what we're saying, 55 is still too fast to have this, you literally, you're gonna have cars, you're gonna have people get hit, you're gonna have cars get hitting each other. I mean, it's just, it seems like they're, I mean, this is not a criticism.
No.
But when we're talking about an integrated approach, that is the essence of it, integrated approach, right?
I think we married both of these
Yeah,
things.
right.
They happen simultaneously, the traffic calming measures in addition to
Yeah.
reducing the speed limit.
Right.
And I think we have a great solution, and the long-term idea, maybe it could be the medium term, is to have a separate bike ped area that similar to what they have in Lewis. Some of the trails to Georgetown that you guys have all done, I mean, they're fantastic. I mean, that would be a dream, and we can connect all the towns in this area. If you sort of step back and say, what a keystone area this would be is if you could get from Millville, Ocean View, North Fenwick, you get to all these areas on your bike safely, you know, and bikedelaware.org does great work with that. You guys, everybody should go to their website and look at some of the projects that they've advocated. I brought James Wilson down here, he'd really never been down here before, and I showed him the risk. We spent 4 hours riding bikes in this area.
And he's been on the call, by the way.
And he's great, you know, he gets it, and like, we could have, you know, we could have these separate bike paths in this area that would really set us apart. Or basically, we're supposed to be the family quiet resort area. I mean, basically, we'd be telling the truth, right? Because it's safe.
Okay, so I do want to kind of bring us back, so if we can take one more question.
We also have
Right.
some folks online.
That's what I was gonna say, I want to go to online, people that have been very patient with us. So you had the question.
Yeah, this is not a question, it's a statement. If you are looking at trying to stop moving at 55 miles an hour, it goes back to when we all got our driver's license. For every 10 miles an hour, you need a 1 car length distance, because the physics says you cannot stop because of 1/2 mv squared. That's your kinetic energy. That's a moving car. That v is velocity. When you square the velocity, your brakes can only do so much to stop you. So it seems like not considering a reduction in speed limit makes the crosswalk stopping impossible.
Well, we're not considering, we are considering
But-
it, just not
Okay,
immediately.
okay, so
And-
it should definitely be
Yeah.
in your analysis, that's all I'm
Yes.
saying, I'm not asking
Agreed.
the question about it, I just wanna make sure that doesn't come up.
There is a tool called US Limits too, FHWA put it out for evaluating speed limits, and it essentially recommends a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit because of the nature of the corridor. And I can say, you know, squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to speak. I mean, Seth's done a great job, and you
So I saw that
so
data,
all
and I saw that analysis, and they looked at Fenwick to Dewey, and they included the state parks. They didn't look specifically at North Bethany, am I correct? So they skewed the data by looking at the state parks, which, you know, you have 9 miles between the bridge and the start of Dewey, where there's no residential development, there's no commercial except for Old Inlet Bait Tackle.
Right. Yeah, we can do additional speed studies, and
Yeah, Tyler, I don't remember, so Chris Sylvester was still here when that was done, and I
Yeah.
can't remember what the lengths were, but I think he's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a longer, I know for a fact, it was, I don't think we went to Fenwick.
I said to
but
myself,
know it was
like,
a longer, it was
there's a little
longer
bait and
stretch.
switch going on here. I
Yeah.
mean, they're mixing apples and oranges, and the reality is we live in an area that's very different than the area between Dewey and the bridge.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
So,
There's nothing there.
look, we appreciate everything you guys are doing. We're just saying simultaneously, I think if we're gonna do all these wonderful things to calm traffic down, we also have to basically lower the speed limit. I don't know what else to say. I mean, you know, they go hand in hand. I know one's gonna go first and the other one will probably happen right afterwards, but I don't understand why can't we just do them both at the same time?
Leah, can we go to online, please, for?
Yeah, so we have a lot of folks online. One of those individuals is Linda from DelDOT, who's the pedestrian coordinator, who
Yes.
wanted to chime in. So
Please.
Linda, you should be allowed to talk now if you unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is Linda. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we need to keep in mind that some of these measures, some people have been referring them to as traffic calming, reducing those lane widths, having that extra striping between the lanes and the shoulder area where the bikes and peds are, and also adding more plantings in your median area. All of those are going to help to calm down traffic and help to slow it down just from the physical environment. But especially with the RFBs, having the marked crosswalk, having those lights, but also having those advanced signals, which I've seen in New Jersey and some other places, it gives more visibility definitely to the bikes and peds that are crossing. And if you add a few of those, it's all going to add together to calm things down and to slow things down. Of course, we can always have targeted enforcement with police, but I think we all realize they're covering a vast area. So anything we can do in the physical environment and reducing the lane widths is something that DelDOT is going to be doing really statewide from now on to try to reduce speeds.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, so again, we have a lot of hands up here, and I understand people may have other plans with their evening. We are here as long as we need to be, but I would note, again, if you do not want to wait to make your comment heard if you're online, a written comment is just as valuable, and we will be compiling them, and they will be formalized as part of the report, so they're not gonna go into a black box. We'll be providing them to your elected officials, and other places in DelDOT. So that being said, I'm gonna go down the list here with folks who haven't spoken first. So Alan Talpilar, you should be able to come on if you unmute.
My name is Alan Talpilar. I am a homeowner in the preserve in North Bethany. And I want to thank you for having this meeting this evening. I'm a little baffled, quite frankly, and that's probably a euphemism for how I actually feel. We keep talking about the goal of calming things down and slowing traffic down and things we can do in the long term that will help us get to that point. Yet the obvious solution, the first one, is to lower the speed limit. And yet that, for some strange reason, does not appear to be on the table here, which has me just very upset. I was in Dewey this summer, where the speed limit, by the way, was lowered in the past year from 30 to 25 miles per hour. And I witnessed, there was mention earlier of a near miss. I witnessed about as close to a near miss as you can have at one of these RRFB crossings, where I was in the left lane headed northbound. There was a car in front of me that stopped at the RRFB. I stopped behind that car. There were 4 young women crossing from the median, and unfortunately, the car traveling in the right lane at 25 miles per hour did not stop, and the 4 pedestrians crossed in front of the stopped car in front of me, and I started hitting my horn very aggressively to let them know to stop their walking. And I can tell you that they missed getting hit by the car at 25 miles an hour by, I would say, a matter of a few inches. So now we're talking about a 55 mile an hour speed limit, where in Dewey at 25, the police are about every 2 or 3 blocks and are pulling people over left and right. The police in North Bethany, unfortunately, are not to be found. So as the data shows, it's not at all uncommon to have people going 65 miles an hour. And we're going to expect that putting up an RFB is going to make things safer. I'm sorry, I'm really at a loss to understand how you expect some cars to stop on a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit road where people are doing 65, and hope that the other people in other lanes or behind them are also going to stop. Just you can't do it. It cannot be done without lowering the speed limit, not afterwards, but beforehand. That's the first thing that needs to be done to allow people to safely drive, walk, and ride their bicycles in North Bethany.
Thank you, Ellen. Moving on to Joanne and Drew Finley. And you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yes, we live in Tower Shores. We've been there for like 15 years. And I also absolutely agree that the speed limit needs to be lowered. I don't know of another road where you have bikes and pedestrians next to a 55-mile-an-hour road. That's an interstate. I also had a near miss this summer. I was riding my bike and somebody tried to pull out really fast from one of the North Bethany communities. I had to swerve into the road where everyone was going 55 and faster, and it scared me to death. So I do want to emphasize what the gentleman for the biking club also said is it's really hard to count the near misses, and there's a lot of them. So I'm glad we're looking at this, but I don't see how we're going to make changes unless the speed limit gets lowered.
I have an interesting question. Do you all not have any school-age children in this area getting picked up by buses?
Do what?
I've never seen a school bus along Route 1, but I don't know if that's the case, Doug or Ron. I know there's the public buses, like no school buses.
No school buses that I know of at all.
I have one more thought. Has anyone ever looked at having speed cameras?
They're illegal.
So speed cameras are illegal in Delaware.
They're illegal?
Yes, illegal. They are not permitted by law.
I
The
didn't
only
realize
exception
that.
to that was for the I-95 construction, and that was just for that instance, a pilot program for that instance. So
Because I
elected
know
officials are in the room, so
the state
talk to them
police,
about incorporating that as a long-term strategy here in Delaware if you're interested.
Can I speak to the
there
speed
is
camera?
interest in it.
Sure, we have someone who's speaking to the speed cameras here.
I'm not a proponent of speed cameras. They're a private entity that put cameras in the state. It's like the light, the traffic light. We have some traffic light cameras up in between Rehoboth and Lewis. They're a private entity that puts those in, and that is a for-profit organization that does that. And I'm not a fan of that at all. I don't necessarily dislike speed cameras, but I don't like the system that is used for those.
Well, couldn't the state of Delaware do it and profit from it? And that
Well,
would definitely be a deterrent for people.
I don't know. I'm not sure what it would take for the legislature to do something like that.
Because the state police just don't have time to police Route 1. Not
Well,
where we are.
Well, I'm gonna see about that.
Thank you for your
All
comment.
right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Okay, Mark Greenberg, you should be allowed to unmute.
Thank you, and I appreciate the work that you've all done on this. But I have to say that we have a place at the Villas at Beach Cove, and it is scary to cross the street. And whenever we have company visiting, they look at us like we're crazy to be crossing a street where cars are going 55 miles an hour. And I really have not seen anywhere else in the country where pedestrians cross the street where traffic is going 55 miles an hour, where there's no light. So this is, it's pretty bizarre in a way. I understand the process that you're talking about, but if the goal is to calm traffic down, as people have said, it just makes a lot of sense that lowering the speed limit is one of the first things to do. I have never heard anyone objecting to this. So in terms of the massive public outcry, I'd like to know, you know, who is this that's you know, crying that we should, you know, can't lower the speed limit. So I really want to say that I and all of my family and all of our friends who visited, you know, are in favor of lowering the speed limit right away. And I think that should be done. It sounds to me like the study that was done to say that the speed limit should not be lowered was actually not done on this particular area. So it really, you know, it looks to me like there's no reason to keep us and to keep you from lowering the speed limit.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Thanks.
You, JR, you should be able to unmute and speak.
Hi, I'm John Russell. I'm with the Ocean Ridge West Development, which is just north of the Fresh Pond Park entrance. We've been here for over 25 years, and our residents, and at one point in time, around 1990 to about 2007, the speed was reduced from 55 to 45 in season. And I know for a fact that there are at least one representative who's in opposition to that and would rather have his constituents who complain about how slow it was during that time, would rather have faster speeds. And he does not support what's being happening or what's trying to be happen with lowering speed limits in this area. The other question I have is, at one point, from about 2007 to 2017, all the North Bethany subdivisions on the west side of Route 1 had crosswalks. And when the road was repaved back around 2017, 18, somewhere in that neighborhood, they started to put the crosswalks back in, and they were told not to while they're in the process of trying to paint the stripes. Are those crosswalks going to be replaced?
So to answer your question, yeah, that's basically what we're looking at for this whole corridor, is trying to get multiple crossings across Route 1. I wasn't involved in that past project, but I'm assuming they were removed because it's inviting pedestrians to come across and there's absolutely nothing there. And RFBs, I don't think there's any ideal solution here, but at least an RFB is going to provide enhanced,
Well, we had crosswalks and we had crosswalk signs up.
Right,
we have deeded access. That neighborhood, Ocean Ridge West has deeded access. We have historical deeded access.
Right.
So legally, we are entitled to safe passage across the street.
Right. Yeah, so again, I don't know what went into the, what? Halloween. Sorry about that, we have a little background noise here.
Yeah, and actually, if you go into Google Earth, you can see an old aerial with all those crossings in place, which we looked at.
Yeah, again, I don't know the history. I'm assuming they're removed for safety concerns. Just a static sign, it's not going to do the job. But yeah, I don't have any further info on why they were removed.
Yeah, I think that predates most of us that are here now, unfortunately. So I apologize for that, but thank you for bringing our attention to that. Again, that's why one of the reasons we're trying to kind of get something back out to try and alert drivers and make crossing. I mean, people are crossing now without any facilities.
Right.
And so we're trying to make sure there's at least something there that can alert people that they're there. I mean, you're going to see those rapid flashing beacons, whether you think they'll stop or not. It's going to make the people that are crossing definitely more visible with the lights flashing.
True.
Thank you.
I got one suggestion. since we're so close to the Fresh Pond Trail, and of course, Ocean Ridge would have to agree to this, is we put the crosswalk between the Fresh Pond Park and Ocean Ridge West / Ocean Ridge, halfway in between. That somewhat limits or helps with the turnaround folks doing their U-turns on each intersection, where it doesn't block them with having a crosswalk.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be looking at the entire corridor. That's actually one thing we looked at, was closing the Fresh Pond crossover and pushing a crosswalk up closer towards Ocean Ridge West. So these are all things that we're going to be looking at in our strategical design, if you will.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, moving down the list. Ken Wilner, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, yes, this is Ken Wilner. Our house is in Pelican's Couch. First, I want to say thank you to the folks who put the time and effort and study into coming up with these proposals, which I think are a first step. I do want to say, I don't want to belabor the point, but I agree with many people already who have said that we really need to reduce the speed limit. I think I can speak for myself, my family, and everyone else that I've talked to in our development. If there's anyone opposed to it, it's not the people that live right by Route 1 like we do. Of the things that were proposed, I particularly like the idea of separating the bike and walking paths from the main road. As someone who bikes on Route 1, you know, everyone who's been there has had a car go by about 3 inches from their shoulder. And anything to separate those bike lanes from the car lanes, I think would be advantageous.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we've seen that the protected bike lanes are definitely much safer. Unfortunately, they are much longer term, but trust me when I tell you, they are being studied as a longer term option.
Thank you, Ken. John Worthington, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I too want to thank all of you for having this meeting. We live in, our home is in Ocean Breezes. And, you know, again, I don't want to beat this thing into the ground, but just another resident saying how much they support what everyone else is saying, or the majority of what I hear is reducing the speed. Obviously, I think Linda from DelDOT, I think that was her name, who spoke, and I think she hit the nail on the head when she said that, you know, if we take those other, what I think is in the long-term or midterm buckets, and try to hopefully move those up in terms of a buffer or something to make it look less like a highway. I mean, it really does, from the minute you pass that stoplight at Fred Hudson, and by the time you're heading toward Indian River Bridge, it's a highway. And it's a very dangerous highway. And, you know, and I think this is not just a north, you know, obviously those of us that live in North Bethany, it's very important, but I think it's just so many people in season and even, you know, even out of season that come there to bike because it is so beautiful, and to, you know, enjoy walking or jogging. And I think we all are saying the same thing, but it's just incredibly dangerous and so scary, and really kind of hard to get your head around that in this area that has so many residential subdivisions, that it is a 55. And you know, we're looking at risk and reward. Obviously, the you know, the reward of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, which it's obviously your survey said it's significantly less than that. You know, the reward is just so great in terms of safety, and overall the aesthetic look of what hopefully this will look like. I had sent a screenshot to Seth only because I had his email from this invitation, of a, you know, a guardrail that is a combination of wood and metal, which I think is very tasteful. You know, obviously I would love the grass, but I know that the grass would require shifting lanes and definitely would be a very long-term project in terms of, getting a lot of buy-in, but I'm wondering, just as a suggestion, if a wood and a metal guardrail could also be put on the table to at least review, to separate. And again, you'd have a lot of start and stops. I get that. There's, 20 different neighborhoods on the west and the east side. So there would be start and stops to get in and out. But it would definitely, as a pedestrian or as somebody using the bike lane, it would definitely make me feel a little bit better that whatever, hopefully 45 miles an hour, there's something protecting me and the vehicle that's, going that speed. So again, thanks for all you're doing. And those were my comments or suggestions.
Thank you. We have Seth sending that to Leah and hopefully me as well.
Yes.
For consideration. So thank you for that.
Thank you, John. Sarah Lee, you have the mic if you unmute.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sarah Lee Greenberg, and I live in Ocean Ridge West. And like John Russell said, our community has deeded access to the west side. So we cross over the medium to use the beach, and it's only pedestrian access. We cannot drive onto the community across the street. We have to walk across there. And the east side crosses across the median to use the pool, our tennis court, and kayak access. And I believe Cotton Patch is the same way, where it's pedestrian access back and forth. When we bought back in 2006, the speed limit was less. It was 45. My kids were in middle school then. I was also a resident looking from my deck at the woman from Pennsylvania who was killed laying in the median strip with the blanket over her for hours. And this is so many years later, and it still brings me to tears. I don't believe a speed limit is worth a life. And and the trauma of watching somebody killed and laying in the median, it's I can't even put it into words. So now I'm a grandmother, and I cross that street to go to the beach with my grandchildren. And every time I cross that street, they're little, so they're in strollers, and people are texting and they're not watching. And you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting, and then you just run across the street. But it's not just, and then coming back, I stand in the middle of the median. I won't even stand near the edge to cross because I'm scared somebody's going to be texting and swerve. And I don't want my grandchildren to end up like that woman did from Pennsylvania, laying there with a blanket over them. So I just implore you, all these things to make it look like a residential area. It shouldn't look like a residential area. It is a residential area. And it's up to the state that we live in to take care of its residents and not worry about the vacationer or whoever that might save a minute or two. I think you have a responsibility to the people who live in your state and to their lives. So I just implore you to please consider lowering that speed limit for the safety of the residents, of our children, and of our elderly parents who may want to cross the street to go see the beach. Because I know that they can't run across. So that's all I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Joe's iPhone. You're allowed to speak. If you unmute, you should be able to provide your feedback, Joe. All right, well, maybe Joe will stepped away from his phone. We'll move on to Cheryl Happler.
Hi, yes, I would actually like to piggyback on top of Sarah Lee's comments. I'm a resident of North Bethany. I've I've spent over 30 years vacationing and then becoming a resident of the area and enjoying the community that is known as the quiet community. I walk almost daily in both directions, north and south on Route 1, and I frequently ride my bicycle. And I am oftentimes scared by the speed of those vehicles that are passing me as I always walk in the correct direction, whether it's marked as a pedestrian lane or a bicycle lane. And I really feel that the success of reduced speed limits on Route 1 in Rehoboth Beach, in Dewey Beach, in Bethany, in South Bethany, Fenwick, in Ocean City, sort of amplifies for me as a resident of North Bethany that my life and my family's safety is not as important as all of the communities around me. I think that's disgraceful. I don't think that inconveniencing somebody for a minute of their slowing down in my neighborhood should be a priority. I think the safety of residents everywhere, whether it's in North Bethany, South Bethany, or anywhere in the country, as public servants, the #1 priority, and as neighbors, our most important concern, and safety for each other's life. So I echo the short-term and very, very realistic solution of lowering the speed limit. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your opportunity to express my very strong opinions.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, Sherry Wintet, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, this is Tom, Cheryl's husband. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. We live in the Cove and we always come across the bridge headed south. We can hardly get into our community. Every time we come down, somebody is beeping at us. We have a very narrow entryway in to make a right into the Cove headed south, about a mile below the bridge. And people, we've almost been hit at least 50 times, rear-ended, because they can't wait to do 60, 70 miles an hour to get by us. I have 4 grandchildren. We cross over. My new rule is, as of this past year, nobody goes in that walkway. I take them across in a car. We have access to the beach through a community across the street, but nobody goes across walks across the highway unless it's in a car. We don't walk. It's absolutely ridiculous. It should be south of the bridge, the first 1/8 of a mile, 16th of a mile should be 45, and it should be down to 30 miles an hour. It's crazy. This is like the Wild West in North Bethany. And of course, everybody else in Bethany, Dewey, and Rehoboth, 25 miles an hour. What's wrong with us? Why is this taking so long? I didn't really realize how bad this was until I had grandchildren and I had to hold their hands and push them across the strollers. People don't stop. They're coming 60, 70, 75 miles an hour. It's a raceway. You should hear it at night. 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, when they have an event in Ocean City, people are racing up and down there. You can hear them on their motorcycles and their cars. They're doing excessive speeds. It's just, something's got to be done, and it's got to be done before next season. I don't know. I appreciate everything that everybody's done. But this is just, you can hear it from everybody. It's speed, speed, speed. And we are afraid. I guess that's all I have to say, but thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think, looks like we have 3 more folks. Brenda Smith.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My husband and I live in Seabrake, and I have a question. I had to leave the conversation for a few minutes, so this may have already been covered. First of all, I want to thank you all for doing this very thorough presentation. I do appreciate it. I called one of the politicians that we were asked to call 2 years ago before we became full-time residents and Delaware, quote, citizens. And he said, I appreciate your call, but I'm only going to listen to full-time residents. So now I am a full-time resident, and I want to know, are the politicians going to listen to the people in my neighborhood who just have summer homes? Or do you have to be a full-time resident to get their attention? And are changes only based on what politicians are hearing from full-time residents? Or do we count at all for the rest of us in Seabrake who are not full-time residents? Are their voices being heard?
This is Ron, the local representative, and I'm not sure I want to say I'm a politician. I'm an elected official.
Okay, I appreciate that.
But I have been listening, and I think it's loud and clear that this community wants the speed limit lowered, and we're going to look at it. But I don't think that's what's going to get people to slow down as much as trying to do something that takes away the look of this area as wide open. We got to do something to change it, and that's what some of the suggestions have been here. Because currently it just looks like it's wide open and people go. So even if I think you put a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit out there without doing the other things that they're talking about, I think people will still speed. But we need more enforcement. And I mean, I'm still sitting in this room and I've been listening. Okay, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I know my husband and I bike 5 days a week, and we are scared out of our tree to be on Route 1, but we love the area and we would love to bike there, but it is scary. And I do hope somebody's listening to not only full-time residents, but summer residents as well. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. We at DelDOT, we're listening to everyone who's using our roads, right? And that's our goal, is to keep everyone using our roads safe, not just the people who live here.
Thank you.
Full time. Sure.
Thank you, Brenda. Okay, Jerome.
Yeah, I just, my name is Jerry Cifarelli. I'm a 30-year homeowner in the, and I just want to appreciate the work that's being done. But everyone knows this is a very serious issue. And I even can't, when someone's laughing in the room about it, I can't accept that. Because the fact of the matter is, we don't even allow our kids to bike on Route 1 anymore. I don't want to bike on Route 1. And to think what is being done in Bethany, South Bethany, Lewis, in Rehoboth, I assume those communities can control their speed limits where we can't, because we're controlled by the Delaware state. Is that the reason why we can't get any immediate action here? Why is the speed limit on South in Bethany 25 miles an hour? Why is the speed limit in South Bethany 25 miles an hour? And how come we're like right down the street and we can't control the speed limit in our area?
I just drove through South Bethany. It's 35 through there.
Yeah.
I think it's 25. South
Bethany
Bethany.
and South Bethany are 30.
And the police are out there 24/7, people that do 35 miles an hour. So
The police are out because it's an incorporated area, so they have their own police force, and because North Bethany is not incorporated, they rely on patrol from Delaware State Police. And a little bit earlier, I think there was some consensus around some of your elected officials coordinating with Delaware State Police around some additional enforcement and seeing what's possible there to get some troopers out here.
Is there anything that we could do as a North Bethany community? And to do it, to manage this area? These are a lot of people's lives at stake here.
I might be able to answer that question.
Yes, yeah, please. Yeah, Councilman Hudson.
Yeah, this is Doug Hudson, I'm County Council, and I'm a retired trooper. And I've spent most of my career in Sussex County. Now, some of the towns I give, for instance, Millville, the town of Millville. I got my 2 cents in.
Oh, good.
Okay, the town of Millville does not have their own police department. What they do is they contract with the state police for so many hours per week. And a trooper can sign up on their off-duty hours it's either 2 or 4 hour shifts. They can come and they go and sit in the town of Millville. They patrol the speed limit and then answer calls for service in the town while they're doing that exclusively. They don't respond outside the town. And I'm not wondering if the communities in North Bethany got together and went to the state police, you might be able to do some contract work with them as well. And I wanted to mention that earlier, but I'm glad you brought that up. And that just refreshed it in my mind. But that's a possibility. I don't know if there's something that would stop that. Some of the towns do that. They contract with the
we need
state police,
immediate action.
and they basically purchase so many hours per week to be
To sit
visible.
here
and
and
be
to sit here and look at a plan
and
for 8
enforce
years.
those laws. And
But
that
to look
that
at a
might be
plan that
might
someone's
be a really
presenting-
good answer for you.
We need immediate action. So if we're not going to get it from the state of Delaware, then we have to, well, as a North Bethany community, we're going to have to do something about it ourselves.
Well, that's a suggestion here that the HOAs in this area may be able, so we'll look into that option for you.
I will call tomorrow.
And again, it's gonna be about collaboration, right? Like that was the one thing I wanted to
Yeah,
make
but
sure.
to sit in the room and talk about an 8-year plan is unacceptable.
That wasn't the only thing we brought up. We have
No, but we've been
short-term
waiting.
ones that can happen sooner.
We've been waiting for a solution for 15 years.
Well, we are looking at it now, and so we appreciate your comments, and they're clearly heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, I think earlier I asked you to participate. Are you there to provide a comment? Your hand is still up. Okay, and then moving on, Jeff G. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, Jeff Gospel, Ocean Village. Oh, this doesn't sound too good.
Yeah, hello, this is Joe Aronica.
Joe,
Can
we
you
hear
hear me?
you, but someone else is speaking right now. If you could just hold off for a moment while
Okay, sure.
Jeff speaks, and then you can chime in. Thank you.
Okay, fine, sounds good, thank you.
Hi, Jeff Gospel. I'm an owner for 40+ years in Ocean Village. Just a couple comments real quick, and I'll reinforce everything else on the speed. That's the elephant in the room. That has to be addressed. Whatever agency handles it, a little bit of common sense. You go 65 versus going 45, run the calculations in reaction time. It's the safest thing to do. That could be a quick fix. Now, the one other fella mentioned about years ago, summertime speed limits. That's an option that could be looked at because that's when the heavy use is. I don't know how practical that is, but it should be considered by the agency that handles it. And I guess my only other comment is that pedestrian law in Delaware as to right-of-way and crossways, there's a lot of confusion about it. It may be worthwhile for someone to take a minute here and educate us what the law is when you say right-of-way for pedestrians. Because once you get in that walkway, do you step in the walkway or you just have to be, approaching the walkway? What is the rule? Thank you.
Thank you. And as somebody who lived in a different state, I lived over in Maryland for a few years, and I really felt that they did kind of the education about their pedestrian crossings really well. And so that's something we can look at as well at bringing over and trying to kind of make sure that we educate drivers and pedestrians and everyone about what the laws really are and how that works.
Yeah, and I believe the law is once the pedestrians enter the crosswalk, vehicles by law have to yield to them. In some states, they have to stop, but it's not until you enter the crosswalk. So it's very, I'm not sure the word I'm looking for, but unclear, vague.
Yeah, it is a little confusing.
Yeah, it can be confusing. So you can't, just because you're standing on the side of the road, you can't just start in front of a car.
Right.
But the second you step off the curb, the car has to stop. It's yeah. But I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police officer, so.
All right, Joe, floor is yours if you unmute. We'll be patient this time. Joe, are you still there? You're still muted if you're trying to speak. We can't hear you.
Hi, it's Joe Aronica. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, perfect. I have a place in Bethany Dunes, and the speed limit issue's been kicking around for a number of years, and nothing has happened. But at the end of the day, it needs to be reduced. But it's not going to happen overnight. There's resistance to it. So we've got to take the first step. And if the first steps are these crossovers with the flashing lights, that's going to have the effect of calming traffic. And then if we add flashing lights as one approaches the crosswalk, that has the tendency of slowing traffic down as well. In addition to those, what you ought to have are these flashing lights that show how fast you're going. It's not a speed camera, but it's one of these lights. At least people, until the speed limit is reduced to 45, at least flash it that it's 55. That's going to slow the traffic down as well, because these people, when they're going north, primarily north and south, primarily north, frankly, they're going 65, 75, 85 miles an hour. So, you know, you've got that, and, you know, you've got to start somewhere. And so we haven't been successful in reducing the speed limit to 45 so far. So hopefully these other steps will at least reduce the traffic when folks are approaching, you know, the crosswalk area. So, you know, those are my thoughts. But we got to start somewhere. We might as well start now with these crosswalks. And I would do, frankly, alternate number 1, because that's probably the least expensive and would be brought online a lot faster than the other alternatives. So.
Thanks,
That's
Joe. And as the project manager for 5 Points, we actually worked with the legislators in that area to get the your speed readers installed on a permanent basis. So that's something we can discuss with the local legislators as well. Just it's a matter of finding kind of which perfect location that might be. But that's definitely a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also let me throw, and also the seasonal speed limit. There are other communities and other beaches up and down the East Coast that have speed limits that are reduced from, let's say, the 1st of May or the 1st of April through the end of October. It seems that the folks who are resisting, according from what I understand, the reducing the speed limit are contractors and others who use the coastal highway as a transit to go to work and go to jobs.
Well, let me just say what I said. Let me say what I said to everybody when we first started. So as I was coming to this meeting down Route 1, as soon as I got outside of Dewey Beach, I had 3 vehicles just practically run me over, whip into the left-hand lane and just floored it. And that really surprised me, because here we are, we're in October, right? So that those people are not people who are the seasonal traffic that we would be shooting for. So I'm not sure that it's a seasonal thing. Again, if we're going to talk speed limit, I'd like to talk something longer term and permanent. Yeah, versus when you're doing a seasonal thing, I'm not sure it's as effective. So bear with us.
It's confusing. Yeah.
It's a start.
It is.
Again, it's a start. It's a start.
Understood. Yeah, but bear with us. Bear with us. We'll get there.
And just to piggyback on Jen with those radar speed signs, if you want to Google DelDOT's radar speed sign policy. There's a document. DelDOT does not install those. Those are all funded and installed. Well, DelDOT will install them, but they're funded and requested from outside entities.
The legislators mostly.
Yeah, typically legislators, municipalities.
I've done a bunch of them, and I'm not averse to doing them here.
Yep. Stepping tool in the tool.
We love as many as you're gonna give us. I do think that human nature is such that if people realize they're going 70 or 65 miles an hour, I just don't think they know. I just think
Right, and
you
that's
come
why
off that
it's,
bridge and these people,
that's why it's
they're
your
not aware.
speed.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like the ones that have the speed limit on them as much. I'd rather just have the your speed reflection. Because then you have that check of, oh, wait, what is the speed limit here? Do you know what I mean? Like, so that it's not, you know, oh, it's 55, so now I can go 70. It's this is what you're doing right now. And you're coming into a residential area.
This is Linda again, the pedestrian coordinator. There are different types of those, you know, and some are portable. I've seen where it'll, once your speed is over the speed limit, it'll flash, it'll give a special message. So, there are variations on those too that we can look into.
Linda, there was a really good one that was out just recently, just south of the bridge. It would flash, and I know I was told that it wasn't supposed to be flashing those colors, but
State police is allowed to.
okay, so state police put it out. Apparently, it was flashing red, white, and blue, and it definitely got people's attention.
And I will say, the state police have actually been very responsive when we've spoken with them. They did that as I think a result of probably, Rep Gray and potentially Doug and whoever else, among the elected officials asked them to, but we've also been calling them, and every time we speak with them, Corporal Bant is in charge of, he's a community liaison from Bethany. He's always been wonderful to talk to. He's more than willing to come out and speak with the communities. And so I just think, it seems like everything's moving in the right direction.
Right.
Everybody's on the right page, and I just really want to thank you all. This is the last question, just to say thank you guys.
Yeah, we have one more person with their hand up. I would like to remind you all, the survey link, please. We heard you tonight, we'll be documenting your comments, but if you could do that survey, that would be appreciated. So one more comment from Eric.
Hello, this is Eric Dorshow. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, thank you.
I am a full-time resident of Wharton's Cove, and I am the president of our HOA, and I just want to add my voice into everything. I want to say a couple of things that maybe haven't been brought up. I'm a semi-retired lawyer with offices statewide, and I've worked on cases of people hurt in auto accidents throughout my career. And I would just say from my own perch, the single biggest reason that accidents happen where my clients were hit and hurt is speed. Absolutely speed, no question speed. And I hope that our DelDOT representatives would consider this, because all these other items sound great. It's speed that continues to be the problem. And I think I can speak for all of us about the extreme aggressive driving going on right now on Route 1, most of the time year round. Again, it's a speed situation. They're looking at coming off the bridge. It's a freeway, and they're also accelerating off the bridge. Now, I know when the bridge was first put in, the state police were there giving warnings to people, telling them to slow down off of that bridge. And frankly, that's the last time I've seen anyone from Delaware State Police patrolling that area to enforce even the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. So again, I just want to add my thoughts, comments, and suggestions to all of those who've spoken tonight. And I'm hoping DelDOT will consider a permanent reduction of speed. 45 to 50 would make a lot more sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. So that is everyone. We've made our way through all of our commenters. But again, I would like to emphasize, please take the survey on the screen if you've not already. We've recorded this presentation. So once we get everything packaged, we will be distributing a PDF of these slides for your reference. We will post a link to this recording, and we'll send out the survey. So we already had extremely great attendance for this public workshop. And you can continue to circulate this to your friends and neighbors who were not able to make it tonight. The more survey results we get, the more data we have, the happier we are. And we'll probably leave that open for a couple weeks, probably a full month, I think, to this one, because we want to be as thorough as possible. And we'll be passing all of the feedback we receive on to the other DelDOT divisions as well as your elected officials. So thank you very much. And once we compile everything and revise things, we'll reach out to you. So if you provide your email, you'll be provided with study updates. So thank you all very much. And with that, we are going to log off.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.